Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lysha and I am the owner of Lysha Be Creative. And today I'm back with another tumbler tutorial and I am showing you how to blend water slide using alcohol inks. So I have a couple of cups that came in as a custom order that I am creating today and showing you just what I do in order to blend my water slide images into the background and make it look like it's part of the tumbler. So of course, everything I use will be listed and linked down in the description box. If you have any questions or comments for me, definitely leave those down below as well. Love answering your questions, and definitely make sure that if you haven't already been part of my YouTube premieres, I encourage you to come join YouTube premieres for all of my Tuesday and Saturday videos at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you guys know that there will also be some discount links as well as all the products in the description box, and I feel like that's about it. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. Alright, so the first thing I'm starting with is this 20-ounce skinny that I grabbed from Maker Flow Crafts, and I'm going to go ahead and get my water slide applied first. So to be able to blend my water slide into what I'm going to create as the background, we're going to start by applying the water slide first. So this is a custom image that was sent to me that was for this custom order. And so what I have in that container is just some room temperature water. I like to have my water closer to warm than cool. I just find that the water slide kind of releases from the backing a little bit easier and quicker with warmer water versus cooler water. That's just my preference. I have done cooler water temperatures and it does work fine. I just prefer the warmer water because it's definitely easier on your hands as well. So I'm going to soak that water slide for about 30 to 60 seconds, enough so that the water slide is able to be easily moved from the backing. That way I can get it applied without having it getting stuck or it ripping potentially when I go to apply it. So you guys have seen me apply water slide, but I am going to walk you through this. And so I always like to adhere the one edge of the water slide, and using my squeegee tool, as I remove kind of an inch at a time, I just will begin to squeegee and push out the water with my little silicone brush. So the goal here obviously is to make sure that we get this adhered nicely and that we don't have any air trapped underneath and that we don't have any water trapped underneath. That way when it dries, it's wrinkle free and it looks like it was an image that was directly painted onto the tumbler. So I go around the edges, really making sure that the entire image is on straight to my cup for one, but also making sure I don't have any bubbles or wrinkles at any of my edges. That way I can ensure that I have a nice good seal and I'm not going to have any issues or hiccups or anything that's going to show through that water slide that I don't want to show when I go to epoxy this. I'm going to take a coffee filter and I'm just going to gently dab dry and really just rub the edges very carefully to make sure I can get out any excess water. Then we'll set this aside to dry. For my second cup here, I have a black 24-ounce plump here and I have the image, but I'm going to take it outside and do a few spritzes of white spray paint to give me that white backing I need in order to get this applied to the cup and be able to see the image. So as you can see, my cup has been spray painted, so I have a nice large white space in the front, and then I have a few spots kind of throughout the back, and that is so that I can tie in a lot of the colors that are from the image to the overall background of the cup. So this is kind of the other alternative way that you can do things when it comes to blending a water slide, just depending on what your image and design is. So we're going to again apply a water slide to this tumbler. This is an image that was literally pulled straight off of Google for this tumbler so that I could show an alternative way to adding a water slide image and another alternative way to blending, especially when you have a image that has a lot of black background. So instead of doing a bunch of black alcohol ink, which I'm going to show you in the other tumbler design, this is an alternative way where you start with a black cup and then you add the white spray paint over top. That way you can add any colorants into the white sections as you're blending in your water slide. The other thing I want to note here is that although I did spray this down with a flat white spray paint in those sections, I didn't epoxy this cup. So normally you'd want to apply water slide to a glossy surface, and the way that I get around having a glossy surface when I apply water slide is I took this cup after the white spray paint had dried and I sprayed it with clear gloss spray paint so that I had a nice shiny glossy surface so that I have less of an issue with my edges of a water slide showing up and being really apparent after coats of epoxy have been done. So I hope that makes sense. I didn't really walk you through the water slide portion of this because I just explained that to you in the last section, but if you do need more tips and tricks for applying water slide, I definitely encourage you to check out my tutorial that I did last fall that was a full water slide wrap that gives you kind of all the tips and tricks and things that I do when it comes to applying water slide. I will be doing a tutorial in the future and after the new year that kind of talks about how to prep your water slide for those of you who have questions about that. All right, so now we're going to be on to blending here. So here's the cup that I put the image on with the white spray paint, and I have 3 colors from Jen's Crafted Gems inks. I have Black Hole and Beetlejuice, which are from her primary pack, and then I also have Toxic, which was from her Halloween pack that came out in October, I believe. So I'm taking some makeup wedges because that is my preferred way to blend alcohol inks for water slide images. I just find that makeup wedges really allow me a little bit more control. It allows me to put more alcohol ink onto the tumbler itself, and I feel like I get a better opportunity to blend when I'm using the makeup wedges. So I'm just going to put my alcohol inks in 3 medicine cups here just so I can directly dip my sponge into. You will notice that I just cut my sponges in half, and then I also cut the very edges of the side of the wedge I'm going to be using, and this is so that I don't have such a harsh line of demarcation as I'm applying the ink to the cup, if that makes sense. So because it's shaped like a square or rectangle, you would kind of pick that up if I didn't kind of cut the edge of that makeup wedge to make it a little bit softer. So the first thing I do when it comes to applying my alcohol ink and starting with the blending process of the water slide, I always like to start with black. And I know you're probably thinking wow, that's a lot of black. And I know it is. With Jen's inks, they're very pigmented. So sometimes as you're watching this process, it might look super crazy, and that's okay. I love that her inks are super pigmented because it gives me more of an opportunity to, when I introduce the alcohol, the plain rubbing alcohol, to really blend my colors together. I still can keep the vibrancy of the colors without kind of removing the alcohol ink, which rubbing alcohol tends to do. So it takes a lot more rubbing alcohol to fully remove that pigment, but because her inks are so pigmented, I'm getting more of an opportunity to use the alcohol to really help me blend and merge the colors together versus, when I've used other inks where, just a couple drops of rubbing alcohol can really just super dilute the entire pigment that's on the cup. So I go back and forth with the greens. So I have both Beetlejuice, which is the darker green, and then I also have the Toxic, which is a super light, neon almost colored green. And I kind of just start to create this blend. So I started with black right around the image, then I go in with my darker green Beetlejuice, and then I go in and I start to introduce Toxic to kind of those edges. And then now you're going to see, and what you're watching me do right now is I've just taken a clean makeup wedge and I put some rubbing alcohol on that. I've squeezed out and dabbed out just a little bit so that it isn't so harsh, and I'm literally going directly around the image to soften the black because that's very, very dark, but also to start to get the 2 greens to blend in more of a gradient look and really start to look more like the image was painted or, sprayed onto the cup or painted directly onto the cup with paints versus this image that we had originally started with. So what I have found when it comes to working with alcohol inks is it's all about just taking your time and playing around with things. You're never going to get it within the first couple minutes. This process is something that probably takes me anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, and it really just depends on how large of a canvas I'm using, of course, and what my image works with. But definitely pick out colors that are part of the original image, and that's really going to help you begin to make and create a background that's really going to blend and look purposeful around the image, if that makes sense. So this is all about playing with your inks and just not being afraid to blend things, not being afraid to add more ink when you feel like you need more ink. And it's just a lot of playing with the inks until you feel like you're satisfied and you're happy with your result. So you're going to see me just finish off the bottom here. I like to also like set the cup down away from me, kind of, a couple feet away from me, like on my table, and just look at it from that edge too, and just kind of see if I'm satisfied with it before I decide whether I need to add more ink. Maybe I need to add more rubbing alcohol to blend out a few sections. The other tip that I find is really helpful when it comes to working with alcohol inks or really any project, if you're spending a lot of time on it and you're finding yourself getting frustrated, just put it down and walk away. Come back in an hour, come back in 2 hours, come back the next day, and then pick it up again to decide if you need to add more, you need to take more away. And sometimes that's also helpful. When I first started with alcohol inks, it was a hot mess. Like, I was a total disaster when it came to alcohol inks. I couldn't get the really beautiful design work that so many other makers were creating. And I realized I was just being too hard on myself, that I really was not letting it be fun, and I was focusing too much on trying to recreate other people's pieces versus just trying to do what I knew and just really, testing the limit by just practicing on different style cups with different imagery to really help me understand how and what my technique of blending was going to be before I kind of nailed it, if that makes sense. So give yourself some grace, don't be hard on yourself. Alcohol inks really can be fun, but don't expect that your first use of alcohol inks is going to be the most amazing masterpiece, because I can certainly share with you some of my fails when it comes to alcohol ink cups, and ones that certainly ended in the strip pile before I really found a technique that worked best for me. So I'm just going to finish off blending. Really right now I'm trying to just make sure that the edges of my water slide are not at all showing, and that I really have a great blend around the image, because that is kind of the hardest part of when it comes to blending. So I'm pretty satisfied with that, and I'm going to set this aside. Let's work on the second one. So now we're on to the second cup here, and so I'm going to swap out the inks that I'm using. So I am still going to use Jen's black, that is Black Hole. I put in that cup that I just introduced, I put Fog, that is I believe that's a Pinata ink. I'll link everything down in the description box. And then I also have a metallic gold and like a bronzy color. So because the imagery has a lot of dark color to it, I didn't want to introduce brown, so I decided to introduce more of a bronzy color and then a little bit of some golds here. So this is going to be a little bit of a different technique here. So not super different, but the focus on this is we're creating the entire canvas and background that this image will live upon, versus the other cup that I just showed you and finished with was a cup that was already mostly painted, and I just was adding sort of accents, if you will, to those white areas. So this will be an entire creation of this entire background image, which sometimes can prove to be difficult if you haven't practiced with alcohol inks. So I'm going to start with the Fog color, which is really like a light gray, and I just wanted to introduce this to just create a little bit of brightness or lightness to some sections. I'm going to be adding some gold and some bronze to really introduce sort of almost like a marbled look with the black alcohol ink, but I want to kind of place down this Fog color to really highlight where I want that lightness to show through and really just give a little bit more dimension. Now I'm going to go back in with my black, and I'm going to surround my image again. I will be putting a frame of washi tape around this image specifically just because it was one that I really wanted to stand out. So I do put washi tape on this, but I'm still going to blend the entire background just as I would if I wasn't going to be adding the frame to this cup. So we're starting with black. I'm going all the way around the image. I'm trying not to touch the image since I know I will be adding washi tape to this, but I want to make sure that I am right up against that image to ensure that I have every piece and section of white cup covered by alcohol ink. So black is going to be kind of the dominant color all over this cup, and that's because the imagery mostly has black in it, and then we're going to be layering on top. We're going to be layering the bronze and the gold colors. So again, I'm going for kind of like a marbled look with black and gold. and a little bit of that bronze. So my bronze and my golds do very much look very similar, but all in all, I think they really did blend well together. You probably could forego having the color fog on there. It kind of just depends on, you know, the background you're looking for. But when I saw that when I was placing some of my black alcohol ink over the gold sections I'd already applied, that the gold was still showing through, I knew that I probably could have just not added the fog. So I only had done those two spots. And then I just began to work with the gold, bronze, and black to be able to get kind of like this muddled but marbly look of gold, bronze, and black. So I'm going back and forth again. I did cut up my sponges to make sure that I have kind of just, you know, less of harsh lines when it comes to the makeup wedges I'm using, but I'm doing a lot of back and forth with this. I don't introduce a whole lot of alcohol into this cup just because the blends that I was getting between the gold and black was what I had envisioned. So I didn't really need to lighten up anything. I think I might have added maybe just a couple drops in a couple sections that just were super dark and I wanted to place some gold over top more. But because the gold metallic alcohol ink really does sit beautifully right on top of that black, it really did work out nice to where I didn't have to do a whole lot of blending with using rubbing alcohol. So rubbing alcohol, again, I don't think I mentioned it in the last clip. When I'm using rubbing alcohol, that's helping me remove some of the pigment, but also introduce whatever color is next to it. So if I have, you know, a purple and blue next to each other, instead of having a super harsh line where the two colors are separate, introducing a little bit of alcohol in between those sections is going to help to soften that line so you don't have such harsh lines. So for this, because this was meant to be kind of like, almost like, this reminds me of like, not finger painting, but kind of, I guess, in the sense of I'm just continuing to introduce colors on top of that black base to just bring a real pretty dimension to this cup. So these are kind of my favorite cups to do when it comes to creating a male style cup. I know that a lot of people will gravitate towards like a wood grain cup, which is also really beautiful, but not everybody is into kind of the wood grain look. So alcohol inks and blending with waterslide is always usually my other go-to for male style cups, because otherwise it ends up just being like, okay, can I have this plain black cup, right? Try not to get any glitter on it and also add a name, you know? So I try and do things that are a little bit more fun, because there aren't many mail orders that I have taken that they've been like, yeah, add glitter. Although I think that everybody should love glitter because it's amazing. But this is a great alternative to having options for mail cups for when you're creating things for vendor events or craft shows. Or if you get an order and you're a little bit stumped, I always gravitate to alcohol inks when it comes to mail cups, because there's a lot of different techniques and things that you can do with alcohol inks that still produce beautiful results. So I'm just going to continue to blend. Again, for this, I'm not so worried about my image because I am going to put washi tape around this to frame it out, since this is a custom image and I really want that to be the focal point of this cup here. So I'm not really worried about my lines, the edges of the water slide, so to speak. The other tip that I forgot to mention in the other cup that I was working on is I had cut that out completely, but you also could kind of cut it irregular so that it's a little bit easier to blend your edges. So now it's time to prep and get everything mixed for adding coats of epoxy. So I do allow my cups to sit overnight or for a minimum of 24 hours before I add any coats of epoxy. And this is to make sure that I don't have the epoxy changing the colors of my alcohol inks. So I do not seal my alcohol ink. I know that some people do like to seal their alcohol ink. I do not prefer to. I have better results and have had better results when I do not seal versus when I do seal. But obviously it's to each their own. I do know that there are people out there that like to seal. It's just not a technique that has ever worked in my favor. So I've just gone ahead and put my part A of my epoxy. This is the Flint Sister Supply Store epoxy, their artist cure. And I put that in a warm bath, just part A, and then I've mixed equal parts of A and B into a medicine cup, and now I'm just going to stir this until it's completely clear, bubble free, and that everything is thoroughly mixed. So that's usually about 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes longer depending on how much epoxy I'm working with. I'm working with about 30 mLs here. This is a thicker viscosity epoxy, as I mentioned in a tutorial a couple of days ago, but this is really great for any project, really. I really do enjoy her epoxy, and so applying this is so easy, and I can get through like 2 or 3 cups with just this 30 mLs of epoxy. So this is my initial coat of epoxy here. I'm going to go ahead and apply this to both cups here. So I just wanted to show a little bit of the behind the scenes of here. You guys saw how I like to apply epoxy in another tutorial I just most recently did, but I'm going to try and include the epoxying process in more of my tutorials because I do sometimes get questions about that. And so I have not yet done like an epoxy 101 video just because there's so many of those videos out there, but I will try to be more mindful and include the epoxying process in my tutorials just in case questions come up. But certainly if you have questions about the process for epoxying or something specific as to why I do something, or maybe an issue you're running into that I could help you with, definitely leave that in the comment section. I'd be more than happy to help you or walk you through some tips and things that work for me, or help you kind of navigate how to fix an issue maybe you're experiencing when you apply epoxy. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to apply my epoxy to both of these cups. So I use the 30 mLs between both of these tumblers, and I'm just making sure that I get a nice good coverage. So this is just the initial coat. This tumbler and these tumblers will go through a total of 4 coats of epoxy. That just is kind of my go-to. So some people will get away with just doing like 2 coats of epoxy over a simple cup like this because it's a really smooth and easy cup to epoxy. I have to do at least 4 coats for me to feel comfortable, just because I don't want the accidental bump into a countertop to be what, damages the epoxy or cracks the epoxy. So I do a minimum of 4 coats of epoxy when it comes to these kinds of cups, just as I would, that's usually the minimum amount for any of the other cups I work with or use that have glitter on them. So I like to minimally have the 4 coats just because I feel like it's a much stronger, not a stronger seal, but I just feel like it's much thicker and more durable when I have a little bit more epoxy versus just going with the 2 coats that really this kind of cup would only need. So I'm going to go ahead and torch those, get all the bubbles removed. This will spin for about 4 to 6 hours here. At the 4 to 6 hour mark, I will go ahead and add my second coat of epoxy. So I like to do it before the first coat is officially cured, and that is just because it cuts down on the amount of time of me having to wait in between. After the second coat of epoxy, I wait the full 8 hours or 12 hours until the entire thing is all dried and able for me to touch, and then I'll go into sanding, which I didn't drag you through because it was just the top rim, and before I put it on for final coats. So just another quick clip here of the cups spinning on their final 2 coats of epoxy. So this is the final coat. I didn't put another coat of epoxy on and show you that process because it's exactly what I did for the first initial coat. You will see that I did add the washi tape to the 1 cup. This is just like I think it's technically rose gold, but really it gives off more of a bronzy color, and I just used the washi tape that I purchased from Hobby Lobby to frame out that image on this tumbler. So this was a total of 4 coats. So this is the second final coat, and here's a look at the final results. So these are the cups after they're all finished. I absolutely love how these came out. It just reminded me when I was creating these cups how much fun I have using alcohol inks in what can seem like such a basic design, but really it is a beautiful look. It's a much different look, of course, than glitter, but sometimes it's okay to put the glitter away and just play a little bit in some alcohol inks. And so I'm really pleased with how these came out, and I definitely know that for the custom order that this customer is going to be satisfied with this cup because I love it. I would keep it for myself if I could. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I upload videos every Tuesday and Saturday, and I hope that I see you in my next one. Bye!